You have done everything right. You made the vision board. You wrote out your goals as if they had already happened. You practiced gratitude every morning. You repeated the affirmations. You tried to feel the feeling of already having what you wanted. You did the work. You stayed consistent. You believed, or at least you told yourself you believed, with everything you had, and it did not come, or it came partially and then slipped away, or something kept getting in the way at exactly the wrong moment, and you were left with a question that nobody in the law of attraction world seems to have a clean answer for. If this works, why is it not working for me? Carl Jung never wrote about the law of attraction by name. He died in 1961, decades before it became the cultural phenomenon it is today. But he spent his entire career studying the exact problem that sits at the center of why it fails for so many people. And his answer is not that the idea is completely wrong. His answer is that it is dangerously incomplete. And the part that is missing is the part that determines whether the whole thing works or does not work at all. What is missing is the unconscious. Specifically, what is missing is the recognition that the conscious mind, the part of you that makes vision boards and repeats affirmations and decides to believe, is not the whole of you. It is not even most of you. Beneath the surface of what you consciously think and want and intend, there is an entire other system operating continuously, carrying everything you have never fully looked at, everything you have been taught to suppress, everything you believe about yourself and the world that you would never say out loud because you have been working very hard not to know that you believe it. And that system does not respond to affirmations. It does not care about your vision board. It has been running its own program, quietly and efficiently, since before you knew there was a program to run. And until you understand what is actually in that program, until you have genuinely encountered the material that lives below the surface of what you consciously intend, you are trying to build a house on ground that is actively working against the foundation. Jung would call this the first mistake, believing that the conscious mind is in charge. Think about how often you have experienced this directly, even if you never named it this way. You decide to change something. You make a genuine resolution. Not a casual one, but a real one, backed by real desire and real effort. And for a while, it works. And then something happens. A situation arises. A particular kind of pressure builds. And before you are fully aware of what has occurred, you are back where you started. The old pattern reasserted itself as if the resolution had never been made. This is not weakness of character. This is not insufficient willpower or inadequate commitment. This is the unconscious demonstrating that it has its own agenda, and that agenda has been in place far longer and runs far deeper than any conscious decision you can make in a single determined moment. The unconscious is not impressed by resolutions. It does not respond to the force of intention. It responds only to what has been genuinely changed at the level where it actually operates, which is far below the surface of the deliberate, conscious mind. The conscious mind, in the Jungian framework, is a relatively small and relatively recent development in the overall structure of the psyche. It is the part you are most familiar with because it is the only part you have direct access to. It thinks in words. It sets goals. It makes plans. It decides things. It is the part of you that sits down to write out your affirmations and genuinely means them. But beneath it, vastly larger and vastly older, is the unconscious. The unconscious does not think in words. It does not respond to stated intentions. It operates through patterns, through images, through the accumulated weight of everything you have experienced and everything you have concluded from that experience, most of which you have long since forgotten consciously, but none of which has gone away. And the unconscious has its own beliefs. Beliefs that were formed long before you ever heard the phrase law of attraction. Beliefs that were installed by experience rather than by choice. Beliefs that the conscious mind cannot simply override by deciding to believe something different. These unconscious beliefs are not opinions. They are structural. They are woven into the way you perceive, the way you react, the way you relate, the way you interpret everything that happens to you. And they are almost always far more powerful than whatever the conscious mind decides it is going to believe today. So here is what actually happens when a person practices the law of attraction with a divided psyche. The conscious mind sincerely declares that it believes in abundance, that it is worthy of love, of success, of everything it is visualizing. And the declaration is genuine. The person is not lying to themselves. They truly want to believe this, and in the moments of practice, they genuinely feel it. But the unconscious is running a completely different program. A program that says, in the language of deep pattern rather than articulated thought, that you are not quite enough, that good things do not last, that wanting too much is dangerous, that the people who have what you are visualizing are fundamentally different from you in some way you cannot quite name, that the world is more hostile than friendly, more withholding than generous, more interested in your failure than your success. These programs were not chosen. They were inherited, absorbed, installed by experiences so early and so formative that they feel less like beliefs and more like facts about the nature of reality. And they are running continuously underneath every affirmation, undermining every visualization, quietly ensuring that the reality you actually live in continues to match what the unconscious expects rather than what the conscious mind desires. This is not a personal failure. It is not a sign that you are doing the practice wrong, or that you do not want it badly enough, or that you are somehow spiritually insufficient. It is a structural feature of how the human psyche works. And Jung spent 40 years mapping it with extraordinary precision. He gave the unconscious beliefs, the charged clusters of pattern and feeling and expectation that organize the unconscious, a specific name. He called them complexes, not in the casual sense of having a complex about something, in the precise clinical sense of an autonomous cluster of psychological material organized around a central emotional theme that operates independently of the conscious will and that exercises a powerful, often invisible influence over thought, behavior, and perception. Everyone has complexes. They are not pathological. They are part of normal psychological life. But complexes that have never been examined, that have been allowed to operate entirely unconsciously do something very specific. They attract the experiences that confirm them, not through magic, through the entirely ordinary mechanism of perception and behavior. A person carrying a deep complex around unworthiness will, without being aware of it, interpret ambiguous situations as confirming their unworthiness. Make choices that create outcomes consistent with being unworthy, and relate to other people in ways that subtly invite the responses that match what they already believe at the deepest level. This is what Jung would call the first principle of why the law of attraction produces uneven results. The reality you experience is shaped not only by what you consciously intend, but by the full complexity of your actual psychological state, including everything below the surface. And the below-the-surface material, when it is significantly different from the above-the-surface intention, wins. Not every time, not in every detail, but consistently, over time, in the patterns that define the overall shape of your life. Now we get to the concept that Jung called the shadow. And the shadow is the most direct and most important thing to understand. If you want to grasp why conscious belief, no matter how sincere, so often fails to produce the results it is aimed at. The shadow, in the Jungian framework, is not your evil side. It is not the worst version of you. It is everything that has been pushed out of the acceptable self-image. Everything that was too much, or too threatening, or too inconvenient, or too frightening to be allowed to exist in the conscious, curated version of who you are. The anger that was not permitted. The grief that was not safe to feel fully. The desire that was too large or too strange. The fear that was too shameful to acknowledge. The belief in your own inadequacy that you have been working so hard to overcome that you have never actually stopped to look at it directly. All of that lives in the shadow. And the shadow does not go quietly just because you have decided to focus on the positive. It does not yield to affirmations. It does not disappear because you have successfully convinced your conscious mind that you deserve better. It sits below the surface, carrying its full charge of energy, and it shapes your reality in ways that the conscious mind genuinely does not understand and often cannot see. Here is how the shadow operates, specifically in the context of manifestation. The person who deeply believes, at a level below conscious awareness, that they do not deserve love, that they are fundamentally unlovable in some way they cannot quite articulate, will genuinely want love, will make vision boards about love, will work on their vibration around love, and will consistently, reliably, in ways they cannot explain, find themselves in situations that confirm the deeper belief. Choosing partners who confirm it. Misreading situations in ways that produce that confirmation. Pulling back at exactly the moment when something real is about to develop, without knowing why, because the shadow knows that real love would threaten the entire psychological structure built around the belief in not being enough. The shadow is not malicious. It is not trying to ruin your life. It is doing what the psyche always does, maintaining internal consistency. The shadow is, in its own way, loyal. Loyal to the version of reality that was established long ago. Loyal to the pattern of experience that formed the deepest expectations. Loyal to the internal world as it is, rather than the internal world as you would like it to be. This loyalty is precisely what makes it so resistant to positive thinking. Positive thinking operates at the level of the conscious mind. The shadow operates at a level that the conscious mind cannot directly access. And when the two are in conflict, when the conscious mind is declaring one reality while the shadow is maintaining a completely different one, the shadow wins consistently. Not because it is stronger in some abstract sense, because it is deeper, because it has been in place longer, because it is woven into the very structure of how the person perceives and responds and relates, in ways that a new set of affirmed beliefs sitting at the surface simply cannot override. Jung watched this dynamic play out in person after person. People of intelligence, of genuine desire, of sincere effort, who kept producing outcomes that seemed to contradict everything they were consciously working toward. And his conclusion was not that they needed better techniques. His conclusion was that they needed to stop fighting the shadow and start encountering it. That the shadow's energy, once acknowledged rather than suppressed, once brought into conscious relationship rather than kept at arm's length through positivity, does not disappear. It integrates, it becomes available, and available shadow energy is not dark or destructive. It is simply energy with the same potential for creative use as any other energy in the psyche. Jung's response to this was not despair. He was not saying that the unconscious is an impassable obstacle or that your deepest patterns cannot change. He was saying something more demanding and more genuinely hopeful. The patterns can change, but they change through encounter, not through avoidance. You cannot affirm your way around the shadow. You have to turn toward it. The process of turning toward the shadow is not comfortable. Jung never claimed it was. It involves looking honestly at the things you have been most determined not to see about yourself. The jealousy that you prefer to call concern. The anger that you prefer to call exhaustion. The fear that you prefer to call practicality. The deep, structural belief that you are not enough that sits at the center of so many of the patterns you have been trying to change from the surface. But here is what Jung found consistently in the people who did this work. When shadow material is brought into conscious awareness, when it is acknowledged and felt and integrated rather than suppressed and denied, something shifts. Not in the outer circumstances necessarily, not immediately. Something shifts in the energy structure of the person. The charge that was locked in the suppression becomes available. The psychic energy that was being spent on maintaining the wall between the conscious self and what lived below it is released. And that released energy, that freed psychological resource, genuinely does change how a person moves through the world. Not because they have adopted a more positive mindset, because they have become, in a real and structural sense, more whole, less divided, less at war with themselves below the surface. And a person who is genuinely less divided, whose stated intentions align with their unconscious state rather than contradicting it, does interact with reality differently. They make different choices, unconsciously and consistently. They read situations differently. They relate differently. And the results they get are different. Not because they have attracted different circumstances through the power of thought, but because they are a genuinely different person, making genuinely different moves with all of that increased internal coherence behind them. There is a practical question that always arises at this point, and it deserves a direct answer. What does the integration work actually look like if positive affirmations are not the answer? If vision boards are not the answer? If the work is not at the surface level of stated intention, then what specifically is the work? Jung's answer was not a technique in the self-help sense. It was a direction. The direction is inward, toward exactly the material you have been most consistently avoiding, toward the feelings you habitually suppress before they are fully felt, toward the patterns you can see clearly in other people, but not in yourself, toward the beliefs about yourself and the world that you have been working hardest to overcome, which is a very different thing from actually encountering them. The specific practices he used with his patients included working with dreams, not to decode them according to a fixed system, but to feel into them, to notice what they were addressing, to sit with the images and emotions they produced, and ask what they were pointing toward in waking life. He used what he called active imagination, a practice of deliberately engaging with the figures and images that arose from the unconscious in something closer to a dialogue than an analysis. He encouraged his patients to pay attention to the people and situations that consistently produced the strongest emotional reactions, especially the disproportionate ones, the reactions that were larger than the situation seemed to warrant, because those reactions were almost always pointing directly at shadow material. None of this is comfortable. All of it requires a willingness to be genuinely uncertain, genuinely surprised by yourself, genuinely open to discovering that the story you have been telling about who you are and why things keep happening the way they do is considerably more complicated than it appeared from the surface. But what happens on the other side of that discomfort is not a better, positive attitude. It is something more valuable and more durable. It is the gradual, imperfect, genuine movement toward being a person who is no longer divided against themselves. A person whose unconscious and conscious are no longer running opposite programs. A person whose stated beliefs and deepest actual beliefs are beginning to say something more similar, something more unified, something that the whole psyche can move toward, rather than parts of it pulling in one direction while other parts quietly and persistently pull in the other. Now let us talk about what genuine belief actually feels like. Because there is a quality to real conviction, the kind that comes from deep alignment between conscious intention and unconscious state, that is entirely different from the manufactured belief of conscious affirmation. And once you know the difference, you can feel it immediately in yourself. The ego's version of belief is effortful. It requires maintenance. You have to keep reminding yourself. You have to keep doing the practice. Keep repeating the affirmation. Keep bringing yourself back to the feeling, because the feeling tends to dissipate when you are not actively generating it. There is a kind of performance to it, even when the performance is entirely private and entirely sincere. The ego is working hard to feel something that is not yet natural. The self's version of belief is different in kind, not just in degree. It is not something you do, it is something you are. It does not require effort, because it is not being generated by effort. It is a quality that pervades everything, that shows up in the small choices as much as the large ones, that is present in how you carry yourself when nobody is watching and nothing is at stake. It is felt in the body rather than stated in the mind. It has a quality of settledness, of being grounded in something real rather than constructed from something aspirational. Jung described this as the difference between the ego's convictions and the self's knowing. The ego can convince itself of many things, and it will work very hard to maintain those convictions because its sense of identity depends on them. But the self's knowing is not a conviction. It is not held in place by effort. It is simply what is true at the deepest level of the person, and it expresses itself inevitably and without performance in everything the person does. When someone is operating from the self's knowing, when their belief in themselves and in the possibility of what they are moving toward is rooted in the deepest layer rather than the surface layer, something genuinely different happens in how they engage with the world. They are not trying to believe. They are not performing confidence or manufacturing optimism. They are simply moving from a place of genuine internal coherence. And that coherence, that absence of the internal contradiction between stated desire and unconscious counterbelief, produces results that the law of attraction is trying to describe but cannot fully account for without Jung's understanding of what lies beneath the surface. And this brings us to the concept that connects everything: synchronicity, Jung's most radical and most misunderstood idea, and the one that comes closest to what the law of attraction is pointing toward when it talks about the universe responding to your frequency. Jung proposed, based on decades of clinical observation and a collaboration with the physicist Wolfgang Pauli, that when the deeper layers of the psyche are activated, when genuine transformation is underway, when a person is operating in alignment with the self rather than only the ego, the world sometimes responds in ways that cannot be accounted for by ordinary cause and effect. Meaningful coincidences cluster around important psychological moments. Events and circumstances seem to correspond to inner states with a precision that accident cannot easily explain. The right person appears. The right opportunity opens. The door that was closed is suddenly open, and the person is standing in front of it at exactly the right moment. This is real. Jung documented it extensively. But the crucial point, the point that distinguishes his understanding from the simplified version that the law of attraction has popularized, is this: synchronicity does not respond to stated desires. It does not respond to positive thinking or elevated vibration in the superficial sense. It responds to the genuine state of the whole psyche, including the shadow, including the complexes, including the deepest unconscious material. Which means that synchronicity, when it operates in a person's favor, is not the universe rewarding someone for thinking positively. It is the universe, or whatever we choose to call the deeper reality that synchronicity seems to point toward, responding to genuine alignment, to wholeness, to the state of a person who has done the difficult work of integrating what was divided, of acknowledging what was suppressed, of becoming, at every level rather than just the surface level, genuinely themselves. And, conversely, synchronicity can and does express the shadow. The person who has unintegrated material around scarcity will find synchronicities that confirm scarcity. The person carrying a deep unconscious belief in their own unworthiness will find the universe seeming to confirm that belief, not because the universe is punishing them, but because synchronicity reflects the whole inner state, not just the preferred surface of it. The law of attraction got one thing exactly right. The inner world and the outer world are in genuine relationship. What happens inside genuinely influences what happens outside. But it got the mechanism wrong, or at least radically incomplete, by suggesting that the relevant inner state is the conscious mind's stated intention. The relevant inner state in the Jungian framework is the whole psyche, all of it, the shadow and the light, the acknowledged and the suppressed, the ego's desires and the unconscious counterbeliefs, the full, complex, often contradictory, interior reality of an actual human being, and the invitation, the genuinely hopeful invitation that Jung's framework offers to everyone who has tried the law of attraction and found it inconsistent, is not to try harder at the surface level. It is to go deeper, to do the harder and more rewarding work of genuine psychological integration, to turn toward the shadow rather than suppressing it with positivity, to find out what is actually in the unconscious program rather than simply trying to override it with a conscious one, to develop, gradually and imperfectly, but genuinely, the kind of inner coherence that makes the surface intention and the deep reality say the same thing at the same time. When that happens, the results are not miraculous. They are not supernatural. They are simply the natural outcome of a person who is genuinely, at every level, moving in a direction that reflects who they actually are and what they actually, at the deepest level, believe is possible. And that person does experience something that looks, from the outside, like the universe cooperating with them. Not because it is granting wishes, because they are finally in genuine contact with it, from the whole of themselves, rather than from the thin and effortful surface that affirmations are trying to hold in place. That is what Jung would add to the law of attraction, not to abandon it, to complete it, with the part it cannot see on its own. Before I let you go, I want to ask you something I genuinely want to read in the comments. Have you ever tried to manifest something with everything you had and found something getting in the way that you could not quite name? A pattern that kept repeating, a result that kept falling short of what you were aiming for in ways that felt inexplicable? What do you think was actually happening beneath the surface? Write it below, honestly, because the real answer to that question is the beginning of the work that actually changes things. If this opened something for you, if it named something you have been circling around for a while, I hope you will subscribe to this channel. What we explore here is real psychology, Carl Jung's actual ideas, in language that anyone can absorb and apply to their actual life. There is much more coming that builds on exactly this. And for those of you who feel a deeper pull right now, not just toward understanding, but toward genuine reconnection with who you are beneath the patterns and the programs and the divided inner life that has been getting in your own way, I want you to know about an ebook we created called Reconnecting with Your Divine Essence. It was made for people who are genuinely seeking more peace, more purpose, real inner healing, and a deeper connection with God beyond the noise and the striving of daily life. You will find it pinned in the first comment below this video. Carl Jung spent a lifetime saying that the most important journey is not toward what you want, but toward what you actually are. That the self you have been trying to build through affirmations and vision boards and force of will is not the self that the universe responds to. The self the universe responds to is the one you discover when you stop performing and start integrating. When you stop trying to believe and start becoming genuinely whole. The law of attraction is reaching toward something true. Jung would complete it with what it is afraid to say. You cannot attract what your unconscious rejects, and you cannot change what your unconscious rejects without turning toward it first. Turn toward it. That is where the real work begins, and the real results follow.